Hey guys, I'm Jeff Matson. I work for InMotion Hosting, and a lot of things that people don't realize is when they see me at WordCamps and things like that is that my primary job description is actually writing documentation. And I write a ridiculous amount of documentation on a daily basis, actually about 8 hours a day. And the primary reason for that is to reduce support tickets for our guys, as well as to generate additional traffic as well. So today we're going to talk about writing better documentation. Now, how many of you guys actually consider documentation to be part of your development workflow? Good, good, great. You should be. If you don't, see me later. So we're going to take a look at how you can write better documentation so that you can do two things, is reduce support tickets, as well as make your customers a whole lot happier. So first we're going to look at why you want to write better documentation. And those reasons are, like I said, reduce support tickets, enhance customer satisfaction, and increase traffic. Yes, documentation does increase traffic, and it's dramatic. And we'll take a look at that in a little bit. And you also, one other thing, is to make it easier on your support reps. Now, we look at support ticket reduction. And a lot of users, most of the time, and I'm not going to say every time, but most of the time, they're going to try to resolve issues themselves before they contact support. And the reason by that is they want their information immediate. They don't want to have to wait for you to respond to their support ticket. If you have it properly documented, they have the ability to find that information. Now, you want to make your customers happy, and don't make them dig for that information. They'll be able to find it a whole lot faster that way. And you want to increase traffic. And we'll go over about how we're going to increase traffic in a little bit. But documentation, if you do it properly, can bring a dramatic amount of traffic to your site. You get branding from related search terms. So if you have, for example, a form plugin, and somebody's looking to how to basically take that form and do something else with it, if you already have documentation on how to do that with your plugin, you may actually convert them from another plugin to yours and generate a sale from that. Now, good documentation shows you care. If you have something out there that's not documented at all, how is that showing that the individual is cared about after they give you money? You want to make sure that you provide an image of actually caring about your customer after they've already purchased your product. You want to give your support reps a helping hand. How many of you guys have support reps on your payroll? Anybody? No? A couple of you? Okay. Excellent. So you want to help them out. You want to make sure that your support reps have the easiest job they possibly can. Make yourself wonder what you pay them for. So if they're directing a customer to an article, it's a lot faster than them walking the customer through every step of the process every single time. If you have to repeat something twice, there's a problem. So you look at, and how can you make your documentation better? We already know why we need to have good documentation. We need to look at how we can make it better at this point. You want to assume your customers have a 5th grade education. I wish that every one of our customers was as intelligent as everybody in this room. Unfortunately, they're not. A lot of times you run into a problem where they have issues really reading and understanding. They may not have the greatest reading comprehension level. They may also, and another thing that helps with this, is that they may also be translating your content. And when they're translating your content, a lot of that information is lost. So if you write it in basic terms, they're able to translate that content a whole lot better. You want to use visuals. There's a lot of documentation out that doesn't use visuals. And for end user documentation, as far as how do you do this in this specific piece of software, you want to make sure that you spell it out to them as best possible. If you have pictures, it helps. If you have videos, it's even better. There's a lot of circumstances out there that that a customer contacts us and says, all right, how do I set up my email? And we send them to an article. If that article doesn't have picture and video, most of the time that customer will say, I don't have time for this, walk me through it. If you have pictures and video, they're more likely to be agreeable about the situation. And it also helps them walk it through a whole lot better than a support rep sitting on the phone and trying to tell them where something is. You want to document the question before you even get it. If a customer is asking a basic question about your plugin or your theme, make sure that you already have that answer ready to go and an article to send them to. If you have to walk them through something basic that you should have documented anyways, there's an issue there. So be proactive about the customer's questions that you're going to get. You want to keep your documentation updated. Who actually updates their content every single time they make a change? You should be doing it. Because if your documentation's outdated, it doesn't help anybody. It actually increases your support tickets. We've seen this, we've tested this. It increases support tickets in the event that, this way, okay. It actually will increase the number of support tickets that you have if your documentation is outdated, because people that may have already been looking for that documentation are now contacting you about it. So make sure it's updated. Update it anytime you make changes and go through it just periodically to make sure that you didn't miss anything. You want to target search engines. And this goes into how you can generate additional traffic. Is if you target search engines, individuals are more likely to search anyways. They're going to search Google before they search your site. So if you target search engines properly, then they're able to come across that content even if they're not paying attention to your site nearly as much. So if you target search engines, you're all set. Now comments help other users, comments help other users. And what I mean by that is, allow comments in your documentation. We've tested this over and over and over again, and we've actually seen increases in search traffic, as well as just general information being answered within comments. So if somebody has a question that's not necessarily directly related to the article, but is kind of there, if you enable comments in there, an individual will ask that question, and then of course be answered, and obviously make sure you moderate your comments. But that question will be answered by somebody, and then you have additional content you're actually building on top of that documentation. Comments also dramatically help search engine rankings as well. User-submitted documentation is something we've also tested, and we've proven that it works well. Because it helps you, it helps your users, and it helps the contributor of the documentation. So a general workflow would be, an individual comes in and they say, okay, I know how to do this, you guys don't have any documentation on it. They write the documentation. They're helping you because you don't have to take the time to write that documentation. Your users are now able to access that information a whole lot easier, as well as the contributor may get something like a backlink. You want to generate traffic with documentation, and we're going to take a look at how you can do that as well, because it actually can convert to sales, and oftentimes it does. Why? Because overlapping keywords with your competition. Like we mentioned in the form example earlier, if you have a plugin that has a form, and it handles forms, for example, and your plugin does one thing, and a lot of other plugins do that same thing. If somebody's Google searching how to do it on that other plugin, they may actually end up coming across yours if your documentation's better. If your documentation is better than the competition, chances are your plugin is as well. If I see something and I'm looking for a plugin, or I'm looking for another piece of software, and I see that the documentation is much, much better on one than another one, it shows that they've actually put in the work to make that documentation better versus just throwing it out there. So if your documentation's a whole lot better, chances are your plugin is as well. If your plugin can do it, write about it. The question that they're asking may actually be a whole lot more common than you think. So in this, we have an example of disabling the WordPress Heartbeat. It's a question we get a lot. And the reason why is because of resource usage. Well, as you can see right here, I decided to write an article one day, and it ranks right here for this keyword. It's good. It generates that additional traffic. Now, when you look at it, what happens is you click on that, and that traffic is now funneled to exactly where I want it to go. And this is where we look into converting into sales. Because now, this article, when somebody clicks on it, one of the headings is disabling the Heartbeat API. And then it says, use my plugin. Simple as that. So it's directed from a simple Google search of somebody wondering how to do something to now me describing what you may do it. And this article has also a lot of other content in there. If you do that Google search, you'll see it. And then you see my plugin right here. People download that plugin. And the proof that this works is since the day this plugin released, and it was actually, we updated that probably a couple months ago, it's gotten 25 to 30 downloads a day, right off the bat, right out the gate, because we have this article here. There's been no other promotion done to it in the slightest. So let's take a look. Wow, this is way too early. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we've learned here. And that's, you want to write like your customers are 10 years old. If you write anything more difficult, most chances they're not going to quite understand the information. You want to be proactive and write your content before it's even asked. You want to use visuals and make sure that everything is completely understood in the simplest way possible. And you want to target search. Make sure that your users are now finding your content not only through your site, but also through external search as well. And I know this was a little brief, but do we have any questions? Mark?
How do you encourage users to contribute to your documentation or contribute to your forums?
It's a good question. And we can actually, if I can have Wi-Fi here, I can show you. Yeah, the Wi-Fi's horrible. But the biggest thing that we've done is actually incentivize that information. So if an individual was to go on our site and write an article about something that they've seen or something that they want to provide information on, we actually incentivize that. We get in the form of points on our site, which are kind of intangible type things, as well as a lot of times we'll just say, all right, what's your address? Here's some InMotion t-shirts, here's some hosting, we'll extend out your hosting, a month or two. We do a lot of things like that. So it helps the individual out a lot, and in more ways than one, of course. Yeah.
Okay. So following up to that, how do they know that those incentives exist?
We actually provide, and it's something that we're actually very recently testing. We do have a couple pages on there that on those pages that say, hey, look, you get these points as well as you may get additional things such as InMotion swag. Yeah.
So with user-created content, tutorials, things like that you guys kind of almost make official part of your site or what have you. How do you go about like kind of curating that as time moves on? As you said, things change. Obviously somebody's tutorial, what have you, or kind of support write-up, it's going to get dated. So I mean, do you guys stay on top of that content as well as your own? Or?
We encourage the user to stay on top of it as much as possible. A lot of times they don't. So what we do is we actually go back behind them and edit as we do. And every time that an edit's made, the original author then receives an email letting them know, hey, we edited your content. If you want to review it or if you have any issues with it, just let us know.
So you do let them know that we're kind of taking ownership of the...
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes?
Do you have any tools to basically collect all of your information, or are you just using it through your site and kind of organizing it in your site?
What do you mean?
Documentation.
As far as our documentation is all organized within our site, as well as we use other tools. We have various tracking tools to see where users are going, what users are looking at, as well as we have deep analytics and things like that to find out what's going on.
I was speaking more, I guess, to creating the documentation. Is there any tools you use to actually create the documentation, like the screenshots and all that? Or are you just using it with kind of like almost like Word and screenshots from like a Mac or something?
Well, the screenshots are essentially made using the particular users, the particular person on the team's preferences, really, as far as screenshots and tools to create the content. We're left open to kind of do whatever we want to do as far as the content goes, as long as it looks good and it flows. I use a built-in screenshot program on my computer here. Different people use things like Snagit, which is a browser extension you can use to take screenshots. I mean, as far as getting the content itself, really, it usually comes down to me saying, all right, I'm going to write a content about this third-party plugin that people are having questions about. And then I write the content about it. I test the plugin, see how it goes. I go through the workflow of I think that a customer should go through, and then I take the screenshots from there, and then I publish it and let it go. Yes?
Do you use WordPress or your own website for the documentation, or you just rely on a platform or
For the documentation? The documentation is actually using Joomla. Is how we run our support center. I'm not a fan of Joomla. I wish we kind of go away from it, but yeah, we use Joomla for the documentation part of things. We have a good Joomla developer on there that makes sure everything's well taken care of for us.
what do you recommend?
For Joomla?
You don't like Joomla, what do you need to
I would recommend using something in WordPress. I've never dug too deep into exactly good ways of displaying documentation or any themes or plugins. Everything we have on our Joomla backend is all custom coded by our guys. So I don't really have anything to recommend right off the bat. Yeah.
You talk about, if your plugin can do it, write about it. But at the same time, when I was first learning how to build stuff, I would come across like, I want to do this. And it was just, here's how to do it, use my plugin. And that's really frustrating for someone that's trying to learn how to do something. So how do you balance trying to help someone learn how to do something with basically advertising your plugin?
Well, I mean, you're kind of doing a little bit of the same thing. And if you do the Google search for the WordPress Heartbeat, for example, you'll be able to see my page and kind of see how it's going. In that flow, on the top of the page, it shows here's what the WordPress Heartbeat is. Here's the server impact of it. Here are the requests that it sends off when you're, for example, sitting on a post-edit page, and here are the requests that happen. Here's the possible impact that can have on your site. And then from there, we have, here's what the plugin does. Now, I'm also amending that article very shortly that actually goes through the code itself of that plugin. And of course, most people can just look at, download the plugin and take a look. But for the users that don't quite understand how it works, we do make an effort to document the code and things like that when we have control of it, of course. Any other questions? Yeah.
I just have one more.
Sure.
Have you seen any benefits or drawbacks of are you guys using obviously a separate site from your main site for your support documentation?
Yeah.
Is there benefits, drawbacks to that?
We haven't really seen any drawbacks or really any benefits either way. Of course, we keep everything separated completely. I mean, we keep every single internal asset separated from another just because to make sure that one doesn't impact another. It really just kind of depends on your preference and how you want to do it.
Subdomain?
I'm sorry?
Is it subdomain?
It'll run as a subdomain as well as it'll get there by a subdirectory, either one. So typically we access by inmotionhosting.com/support, which just is mapped to that subdirectory from another VPS node.
Thank you.
Yep.
What instances would you use videos instead of just pictures and images?
Most of the time I actually try to use videos for pretty much anything that's actually really basic, but people still don't seem to understand it. So we actually have videos on, and I'm trying to think of the latest video I did. And we have videos on things like how to create an email account. People just, it seems simple, it seems ridiculously simple, but people a lot of times, they say, do it for me, I don't want to do it. I was a support rep for a long time, and if you sent a customer an article that was nothing but text, or even just sometimes text and pictures, they would completely just dismiss it and say, no, I just want you to do it for me, or I just want you to walk me through it on the phone. The video portion is mostly just for better understanding so that they can watch you do it as the steps go on. So, I mean, really you could use it for any kind of content. I've typically used it for really basic content that just requires a lot of different locations. So like creating an email account would say, all right, log into cPanel, click on this icon, now click on this, now click on this, and create your account. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
What kind of feedback from users do you collect on the documentation itself? Because like you said, you have comments, and I'm sure in those comments people might talk about like what you're documenting, but what about the documentation itself? to your end users saying, no, this isn't clear enough, or explain more, and stuff like that?
Well, when we get that feedback, and we have article feedback buttons and things like that we use outside of external tools that we're tracking, movement and mouse movements and clicks and things like that. But as far as individual users saying, "Hey, I have a problem with this" or anything, we have a feedback button on the bottom of each article that says, "Yeah, did you find this helpful? Yes or no?" And if they didn't, let us know. At that point, it sends it to our team, and then we review the article, determine if it's a valid complaint, and then go from there, make edits or anything we need to do there. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So we are a small web development company, and we essentially build WordPress sites for clients. I understand where you're coming from as far as putting documentation on your site, and then that way it's publicly available to the world. So not only are you helping your clients, but you're helping other people, you're bringing traffic to your site. One thing that we're thinking about doing is actually providing a set of documentation for each individual site that we create. Do you have any experience doing that? And or any suggestions as far as that goes? I know that's a little bit different from hosting.
Not directly. I don't directly have experience. There is a plugin, and somebody could probably help me out with this.
WP Help?
Yes, WP Help.
That's the one we're looking into using. It's a good plugin.
I've heard extremely good things about it. I would highly recommend it, just because from what I've heard, that you can have a centralized location for documentation and it can pull externally.
You're correct. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? You ready? No? All right, well, thanks, guys. Once again, I was Jeff Matson from InMotion Hosting, and you can, of course, follow me on Twitter, or if you think of anything later, just send me a tweet and let me know, and be sure to help you out as much as possible. Thanks.